Hello, people of YouTube. I am Harry from Harry Likes Wrestling, and this is in fact hashtag Dijak Talks Wrestling. Yep, Donovan Dijak on the show today. Great guy. I'm sure you will all enjoy listening to him. He's one of the best talkers we've had on the show, hands down, possibly the best. Clearly not shy as far as interactions goes. He was great on the show. Really compelling. He was great for giving his opinions too, and I know you guys will all enjoy it. And let's just get straight into it. So, Donovan, we may as well start this off at the beginning of your career, the very beginning, in fact. For those who don't know this that are watching at home or listening at home, who trained you and where were you trained?
I was trained by Brian Fury at a school called the New England Pro Wrestling Academy. It used to be the Chaotic Training Center before that, and before that it was Killer Kowalski's here in Massachusetts in the United States.
And how old were you when you began training?
I was 25 years old when I first started. That was 2012.
And since then, you've had a dramatic rise to where you are now. When you began training, did you instantly turn heads because of your size and your athleticism?
I don't know if I'd say turn heads. There was definitely some assumptions being made. I think a lot of people, especially at that time, it was kind of the tail end of the mid to late 2000s boom in WWE, where they were kind of signing a lot of guys who were taller, physically imposing guys. So I think a lot of people were still under that pretense and assumption that I was just going to get signed right away, which did not end up happening. So I think a little bit of that impacted my early career, in that a lot of people, I think, were hesitant to book me, and that they figured that I wouldn't be around for very long.
And did you grow up as a wrestling fan?
Yeah, a little bit. When I didn't have well, here in the United States, pro wrestling for the most part was only available on cable stations, and we didn't have cable in my household until about 1998. When we did get that, that's when I started watching wrestling for the most part, right in the middle of the Attitude Era there. So I was about 12 or 13 years old when that was occurring, or I guess 11 or 12. So I was a pretty dedicated fan from 1998 to maybe 2003, and that's when high school sports kind of started taking over my time, and I wasn't really watching the WWE product quite as much at that point. But once I graduated from college in 2010, that's when I had a little bit more free time and started watching again.
And during those 5 years, did you have any specific idols?
I'd say that my favorite wrestler was probably Stone Cold Steve Austin.
And as far as 2003 up to 2010, what sports were you doing in high school?
I was playing American football, basketball, and track and field. I threw shot put and discus for track and field.
And after that, when you began wrestling, can you remember back to the first top guys that you remember wrestling in the indie scene? To your pro wrestling career in front of a live audience?
It was great. I mean, the Chaotic Heavyweight title isn't a world championship. The company only runs in New England for the most part, Massachusetts and New Hampshire, I think. So it's definitely not a world championship. But it was nice to be able to win a major title. You know, there's a lot of prestige that goes with Chaotic Wrestling. Just the lineage of guys who've been there, from Kofi Kingston to Damian Sandow, to Sasha Banks, Biff Busick. You know, there's so many talented people who've come out of Chaotic Wrestling, that to be able to hold the heavyweight championship for them was a real honor, especially that early in my career.
You also won the Chaotic Wrestling Tag Team Championships in your quite famed tag team with Mikey Webb, the American Destroyers. What was it like tagging with him back then, especially compared to your most recent tag matches with him? Was the chemistry there straight away, or did it slowly build up to now?
A little bit of both, I'd say. Me and Webb have been friends for a very long time. We went to rival high schools. We played on the same all star football team back in 2005. So we've known each other for over a decade. But in terms of in ring stuff in training, he was there the first day that I was training. We've been training together for 4 or 5 years now. So we've become good friends over that time. We first tagged a couple of years ago, and it was we had good chemistry, but it's obviously built over time. Now we're able to have some really exciting matches, and I always enjoy tagging with Webb. He's great. So hopefully we have at least one more tag match coming up. I can't remember what it is though.
And do you have any personal favorite either moments or matches as a part of the American Destroyers?
I think one of my favorite matches is from Limitless Wrestling. I think it might be on YouTube, but I'm not 100% sure about that. It was myself and Webb against tag team called Take Me Home Tonight. It's Anthony Green and Ace Ramiro. That's one of my favorite tag matches that we've ever had, especially because all four of those guys I really like and are my friends.
Was it very different to the other shows that you worked on a weekly basis?
In some regards, yeah. It's TV for the most part, so TV and pay per view. So you're working towards a hard cam, roaming cams. You have time constraints, agents. Things are booked differently, things like that. But in terms of the in-ring wrestling and the crowds and stuff, all that's, relatively similar. Pro wrestling is pro wrestling no matter where it's done or how it's presented. So there's definitely some similarities and some differences.
And back in 2015, you won an ROH tournament known as the Top Prospect Tournament. For those listening at home that might not know the basis of this tournament, would you care to explain the sort of idea behind it?
So basically, the Top Prospect Tournament is 8 guys that usually from they're either young upstarts or guys that that were previously unknown and maybe did a ROH tryout seminar camp. So it's always 8 guys, and obviously tournament style. It's usually booked over the course of 1 or 2 or 3 shows, something like that. And all the matches air on television, which is great exposure for all of those guys. Basically, ultimately, the winner of the Top Prospect Tournament, I don't know if they necessarily get a Ring of Honor contract. They usually do. But as far as I know, the winner has always gotten an opportunity at the TV title. You get a TV title shot if you win the Top Prospect Tournament. So that's sort of always been the basis of it. And obviously the winner of the Top Prospect Tournament usually gets, a lot more notoriety, so to speak.
And what was it like knowing at the time that you were now considered the top prospect in ROH?
I mean, it's unique, I suppose. I never really thought of it, so literally, because it's kind of more of just an opportunity in a tournament, and the matches themselves were far more important. I put a lot more stock into performing in the matches as opposed to the who was the winner and who was the loser and who got the title and whatever. So to me, it was far more important to put on a good match and a good show, which thankfully all 3 opponents that I had in that tournament, Jake Durden in the first round, Ashley Six in the second, and Will Ferrara in the final, were all amazing matches, and I was very thankful that those guys were so good because it was able to sort of propel me to another level.
So one of the sort of focal points of your career in ROH was a stable known as the House of Truth. Could you sort of explain the whole idea of the stable and how it came about?
Yeah, the House of Truth, in the incarnation that I was in, was myself. The manager, organizer, I guess, was Truth Martini. The Ring of Honor World Champion Jay Lethal was part of the House of Truth, and then it was myself, Joey Diesel, Diego, and Taylor Hendricks was in the group as well for a little bit. Basically, I think the idea behind the story of the House of Truth was that there's this, I don't know, maybe he's like kind of a crazy, sort of over the top, almost like a circus manager, Truth Martini, who has this all knowing book, and we all sort of follow his lead. He obviously has some sort of monetary influence over Ring of Honor, and he basically loves winning in championships. So that was kind of our due diligence, and for the most part, my time in that group was kind of as the muscle and kind of softening up whoever was about to face Jay Lethal, or helping Jay Lethal to maintain his status as ROH World Champion.
And how did that all end for both yourself and the stable as a whole? Helped Truth Martini or Jay Lethal's characters?
I mean, the goal of any storyline is to advance the characters and the product. I can't speak as to whether or not that happened or not, because I don't know for sure. That's kind of the choice of the fans to make. But I know my experience there was good. I learned a lot being around the world champion and being around a guy as knowledgeable as Truth Martini. So it was definitely a positive experience for me.
And after the whole House of Truth scenario in your career, you began a singles career in which you were unlucky at one point in an ROH TV championship match, which was a pretty great match. I'm 99% sure you can find it somewhere on YouTube. Otherwise, obviously, find it on ROH's website. But what was it like sort of moving on from the stable and eventually earning these opportunities?
Which opportunity are you speaking of?
Firstly, the ROH TV title match.
Against Bobby Fish?
Yeah.
It was, really exciting. That match specifically took place in Lowell, Massachusetts, which is right down the road from where I live, my home state. So it was Ring of Honor's first time back in Lowell in a very long time. So we were all very excited about that. The reaction for me was, obviously tremendous. I had a lot of family and friends there. I got to do an entrance alongside a lot of my buddies. With my trainer was there as well, Brian Fury. So that match entirely was obviously great. A great time for me. Bobby's a wonderful competitor to wrestle against. He's obviously one of the best in the world. So I was very happy with everything on that particular day.
And what's it like working with not only Bobby Fish, but working in such a high pressure match for the ROH TV Championship in front of your home state?
It's a little bit of it is nerve wracking, but like anything else in pro wrestling, once you get into the ring, you become very comfortable because you've spent so much time there. So ultimately, it was a ton of fun. I look back and and remember it very fondly. The travel to get there was a little difficult. I was coming back from my honeymoon. I had recently been married right before that show, so it was difficult to get back on the airplane from my honeymoon. But I did make it back in time, obviously, and I was on the show. And the match went about as well as I could have hoped.
And also in your career, you've had IWGP Intercontinental Championship matches. What were they like? I believe it was against Michael Elgin, wasn't it?
Yeah, Michael Elgin at Field of Honor 2016. That was I'd wrestled Mike a ton of times before that. I can't remember how many times we've wrestled, but he and I are familiar with each other. That match was great, in front of a huge crowd. The New Japan collab shows are usually big draws. That was SummerSlam weekend, so it had a big crowd, a big fight feel. Tiger Hattori was the referee of the match. It was my first time wrestling for any sort of IWGP championship, so that was exciting. It was great to have an opportunity like that with some stuff associated with New Japan, and thankfully the match went really well. It was a great time in front of a great fan base, and I've obviously established a relationship with Elgin since then. That's going very well.
And you've competed against some of the best ROH talents, not only to date but of all time. Is there any matches that stand out as far as the fan reception? Like, is there any fan reactions to your matches that stand out, or crowd reactions?
I'd say for the most part, the two biggest the two best received matches for me were probably against Jay Lethal on television and my final match for Ring of Honor, which was against Marty Scurll on television. Those to me felt like the two matches where I was sort of given a good platform in that they were both on television, combined as well with it didn't feel like there were any restraints. A lot of times on TV there's time restraints or booking restraints or some sort of angle or run in or things like that because you need to progress the storyline on television. So those two felt like the two of the times when I had a singles match against a really world class opponent, and there weren't a bunch of angles taking place throughout the match. So that's when I really got to sort of display some of my in ring abilities, and I think the fans were very receptive to that.
And as far as either like short moments or spots like during matches, is there anything that really in your career stands out as like seriously getting the crowd off their feet?
I'd say the biggest ones that come to mind are from Final Battle, where we built a match. It was myself, the Motor City Machine Guns, against whatever that the Rebellion, I think they were called. It was Kenny King, Caprice, Rhett Titus. So we had a 6-man tag there, and I was able to do like a springboard swanton to the outside at the Hammerstein Ballroom. So that was a great feeling, a huge reaction on that particular move. Other than that, I'd say in my final match with Marty at in Pittsburgh when he was the first guy in the company to kick out of my finisher, that was a pretty big reaction that I enjoyed, and just that match overall and the reception afterwards was a really good feeling.
And I think that sort of tied us in nicely to sort of the next sort of section of this episode, and that's sort of the fact that you are most definitely not like the average big man American wrestler today, or in general, especially in general, actually. You are 100% one of the most athletic big men. Do you think that makes it easier or more difficult when it comes to your opponents for the match, when it comes to putting together like a proper amazing match? Because it's almost as if the typical slaying the giant isn't really a thing with you, because you actually can get to their level and do these crazy moves that the crowd can't even believe. So as far as constructing a great believable match, do you find it harder or easier with your like much more vast array of moves that you have in your locker?
Um, for me, it's I wouldn't say that skill set makes it particularly harder or easier. I try my best always to be the most I guess flexible wrestler, not in terms of being physically flexible, but in terms of being able to adapt to different styles. Um, because I can, portray a variety of styles, whether it be I'm wrestling someone smaller than me, bigger than me, the same size as me, a little bit smaller than me, something like that. So I like to be able to adapt what I'm doing to the other guy to fit his or her strengths or weaknesses. And I'd like to think that that's been very successful throughout my career, because I don't always have to do some sort of crazy flip dive. I like to think that if I need to base a match around selling or psychology or whatever other story that they're looking to tell, or we collectively are looking to tell, then we can do that effectively.
That's a perfect example of what you're saying there. Is actually possibly my favorite one of your matches, which was against Tommaso Ciampa, which was there was no flips or anything until, well, there was minimal flips. It was all
I think I didn't have a moonsault at the end, but yeah, that match specifically was a match that I had wanted for a very long time. Yeah. Tommaso's a good friend of mine, and the fact that we were on so many shows together without wrestling each other up until that point was kind of crazy. But thankfully, before he got signed, I was able to wrestle him in a singles match for Beyond Wrestling, and it was a really great match. I learned a lot from that match, and it was obviously a wonderful experience. And it's free on YouTube right now, so anyone can go and watch it.
Yeah, I mean, that match, if you could somehow label it with one sort of subgenre, it was an incredibly hard-hitting match. A very it was very striking, and I don't know if you could bone crunching is sort of very broad, but it was one of those matches that you would see from the likes of Katsuyori Shibata today. It was really, you felt the pain with you guys, and that is one of your best attributes. But what would you say, because you have you're an incredibly variable wrestler, what would you say is your strongest suit when it comes to being in the ring?
I'd like to say that it's adaptability, the ability to highlight my strengths and the opponent's strengths all at the same time. Because whether we need to have some sort of high flying showcase or a hard hitting match like you mentioned, or a technical sort of psychologically based match, whatever's needed, I like to think that I can highlight and sort of premiere showcase those sorts of attributes effectively, no matter what the situation calls for. Whether it's footwork or selling, or I try my best to excel at every facet of professional wrestling. So I would say that ultimately is how I try to focus my abilities.
And the most recent, well, it's the most recent match of yours I watched. I believe it's your most recent match. Was against John Morrison at Wrestle Circus. A great match. Well, obviously a great match. I mean, two great wrestlers that actually have genuine, great in-ring chemistry together. But what's it like working with Wrestle Circus? Because it's sort of portrayed excluding the whole Twitch partnership, which is also different, but it's kind of laid out as a very different promotion. What's it like working there?
It's great. I was very fortunate to be on the first Wrestle Circus show, which was less than a year ago, and they've obviously taken off since then. I've been on about four shows for them. This was my fourth, and unfortunately my final show for Wrestle Circus. But every time I was there, the crowd reactions are huge. The crowds themselves are huge. They're always very hot. And fortunately, I've had great opponents every time. So Wrestle Circus has been great. They're on a meteoric rise. I hope that it continues. But yeah, they're a great upstart promotion and a wonderful place to work. So it's been nothing but positive. My experiences with Wrestle Circus.
And did you watch the show back afterwards, or do you do that at all?
I always do it when it's available. I tried with Wrestle Circus, but I couldn't kind of figure out Twitch.
Yeah,
And I was doing it the very next morning, so I'm not sure that they had the show uploaded yet. I'll probably, now that you mentioned it, I'll probably check it again right after and see if I can access the match, because
I
I think
believe they
every
posted
wrestler
a link to it on their Twitter.
Okay.
Did you hear the buzz around the Shane Strickland Sami Callihan match, which was the second last match?
I watched the match. Yeah, I was obviously there at the show, so yeah, I watched it.
And what were your thoughts on that match? Or what match, in your opinion, stole the show, excluding your own match?
I didn't watch the first half. I didn't watch anything before mine because I was busy, calling match and stuff.
Yeah.
After my match, I try not to rank matches. I mean, there's no stealing a show per se. Every match has its own proper place. For me, I'm trying to remember what matches were after mine. I watch a lot of wrestling, especially live, because I'm on so many shows, and I do my best to watch every match on every show. I only recall 2 or 3 that were after mine. I think in terms of what I like and my personal style, I think Sami and Shane was probably what I enjoyed the most. But I think each match contributes its own, different things and different styles to the show. And that's the great part about any good show is it should be a variety of different things, because ultimately we're working toward building a great product, because that's what we're there to do. Everyone's opinion matters equally, because everyone's dollars ultimately matter equally.
Yeah.
If someone's paying for a show, then their opinion is just as valid as anybody else's. I applaud the Wrestling Observer and other I guess companies and individuals for putting time into watching so much pro wrestling and having the ability to have their star rankings and that obviously helps a lot of fans in terms of what they're going to watch and what they're not going to watch. But unfortunately, I think in today's day and age, it almost kind of sways the opinions of fans before they even see the match, which is kind of unfortunate. Because I think everybody's entitled to their own opinion. I think everybody should have their own opinion. I think it's great that fans watch matches and they're so invested, and that they have their own star rankings. I think that's wonderful, because it means that they have a personal preference and they have an opinion, and it's great that they're voicing their opinion. And I try to take as many of those into account as possible. I just hope that those opinions are genuine and not influenced by what their friends are saying, or what the companies are saying, or what the Twitter consensus is, because that kind of takes the individual aspect out of it, and that's one of the best parts about pro wrestling. I mean, that's one of my. I'm a big movie fan, and if I never rank movies or anything, but I kind of rank them in my head. And I'll get recommendations from Rotten Tomatoes or something like that, yeah. But I'm not going to make my decision on a movie based on Rotten Tomatoes. If it has a 0 on Rotten Tomatoes, I'm probably not going to go see it. But even if it's a 50 or a 60 and it's something that I was interested in and I want to go see, I'll go and see it. And sometimes I'll agree with that ranking, sometimes I'll disagree with it. But for the most part, I try to formulate my own opinions and things like that. And I unfortunately feel like that doesn't happen as much as it could or should in the world of professional wrestling. And I think that a lot of people put too much invest too much stock into what the few are saying instead of having their own opinions. So hopefully that can sort of adjust and change over the course of time, and people can start to formulate their own objective opinions, which is in my opinion, the best part of being a fan of professional wrestling.
And out of interest, have you any idea what Dave Meltzer has rated any of your matches?
No, he doesn't rank many of them. I know he does the Ring of Honor pay-per-views, so that would always pop up. But I don't think they've ever been any good, as far as I
know. I've literally just got it up here. Oh, yeah. He certainly has very vocal opinions. They're all sort of 2s and 3s, but they're not exactly your matches that are on the upper card, so I don't know why he's only ranked those ones. They're all early matches in your career.
Yeah, I wasn't on too much pay-per-view early on in my career. For whatever reason, I wasn't on like the first year of pay-per-views, besides the very first one, Best in the World, 2015. But I mean, I'm not going to hold anyone's opinion against them. I've had my own matches that I like and don't like, and I don't always agree with sort of the fan sentiment. I don't, sometimes I do agree with the fan sentiment, but ultimately it's not about what I feel individually or what anybody else feels individually. It's about what people feel collectively, because I'm wrestling not for one person. I'm wrestling for the majority. So that's how I try to tailor my matches, is to try to let the most people have the most amount of fun, because ultimately that's what draws money for the companies that hire me, and that's what promotes my brand in a positive light.
And speaking of the fans, once again, a nice sort of lead into another proportion of the show. We may as well get into some fan questions that have been sent in for yourself. This is just going to be in completely random order. I'm not going to say anyone's names in case anyone in particular doesn't want their name said, so I'll just read the questions out.
Sure.
What do you think of the state of Ring of Honor's tag team division, i.e. is there too many tag teams? Is it the best tag team division they've had yet?
In Ring of Honor?
In Ring of Honor.
Right now?
I believe so, yeah.
I'm not super familiar with the tag team division in ROH. I haven't been in the company for about 6 months now.
Yeah.
I know the Young Bucks are still there, obviously. So that's that right there kind of puts you in the top threshold of tag team divisions in the world. Well, they don't use Red Dragon anymore. They don't really use War Machine much anymore because they're in New Japan.
Yeah. Who do they have?
Honestly, I'm not 100% sure. I think a couple of the guys I think somebody in Motor City's kind of injured.
You've really brought that to my attention now, because I can't think of any tag teams in Ring of Honor.
Yeah. I think the Rebellion is still doing stuff as far as I know. But I honestly don't watch the product anymore, so I'm not totally sure, to be completely honest.
This one comes in from the same person that actually asked the last one. I think probably should have asked this a while ago, but if you were to move to New Japan, anyway, would you like to work in a death match?
Not really. I mean, I don't know if I would or not. It probably depends on the storyline and money involved and things like that. But I've never been a deathmatch wrestler. I've never even been like a hardcore wrestler, to be honest. I've done like a couple street fights before in my life, but ultimately, I don't think my strength is taking painful things. I'm a bit of a bitch, so I don't consider myself some sort of tough guy or anything like that. I think my strengths come in my in-ring technical abilities. So I'm leaning towards probably not, especially because I just got married and my wife has a young child, so I'm not really
Yeah.
looking for any sort of serious injuries or blood diseases or anything like that. Which isn't to say that I don't like those matches or I don't respect them. I have lots of friends who do death matches. I think that they're great and they're a very unique art form, and I go out of my way to watch a lot of those matches too because I appreciate the things that those guys are doing. They're just not really for me.
What are your opinions? This isn't a fan question, but what are your opinions on sort of the way CZW has completely changed their format? They used to be uh, deathmatch wrestling central, and now they've moved to a much more indie wrestling fed featuring death matches.
I really enjoy it, to be honest. I know Sammy Callahan plays a big part in that. I know DJ Hyde's done a great job, and I like and respect both those guys. I've wrestled both of them a few times, so I think CZW is a great place right now. I have a lot of friends who are doing very well in CZW, and they're not necessarily deathmatch wrestlers either. Sometimes they have death matches, but for the most part, it's a great platform. They have the iPay-per-views. I was on a CZW show once, and it was early on in my career, so it was a great platform for me. So that's been a great place for guys, and it's fortunately within driving distance of New England. So I encourage a ton of guys to go down to CZW as often as they can to make a name for themselves.
Getting back into fan questions. Um, what are your origins in wrestling and first impression that led you to it? I believe we've already gone through your origins, but what were your impressions that sort of got you to do wrestling as a professional job?
It basically was just my interest in professional wrestling. I always thought that I would be a good professional wrestler. I just never thought it was really an option until I discovered the New England Pro Wrestling Academy and found out that it was possible to balance that and a full-time job. So that's ultimately what I ended up doing. Say that if I could pick anybody, it'd probably be like Brock Lesnar, Triple H, or Cesaro.
And as a kid, did you sort of envision yourself at WrestleMania against Triple H, or obviously, well, actually, I don't know, because obviously I didn't start watching wrestling during the Attitude Era, but did you expect Triple H to last this long as a professional wrestler compared to Stone Cold?
I don't know if I ever thought about it, to be honest. I mean, they both sort of have injuries in their history. Um, so yeah, I mean, I guess the way that Triple H wrestles now, it's usually like once or twice a year,
Yeah.
unless it's building up in a feud or something like that. Then he wrestles on a few TVs and house shows leading up to it. But yeah, for the most part, I can't say that I did. I mean, obviously, after Stone Cold retired in 2002 or three or whatever it was, that then it became a little more apparent. But no, I never really saw this longevity coming out of Triple H. It's kind of unexpected.
Yeah, I mean, it must be pretty cool as a fan knowing that one of the top guys as a kid, now that you're a pro wrestler, theoretically, you could actually face that top guy who was a top guy as a kid in a match and they're still in peak condition. Well, they're still in top condition.
Yeah, definitely. It'd definitely be a dream match of mine.
And speaking of dream matches, anyone up to this date that is no longer an active pro wrestler that you would have dreamed to have gone against?
The Undertaker.
At WrestleMania?
To be anywhere, I'd love to wrestle the Undertaker. I'd wrestle him in my backyard if I
could. Okay, so Donovan Dijak at this moment in time is one of the most talked about indie wrestlers today. and one of the main reasons for that is a very specific topic, and that is that you are scheduled to have your final indie shows, and that there are serious rumors flying around that you have in fact signed for NXT, but everyone says that it is in fact all but confirmed. Um, Before we get into the whole all but confirmed part, what's it like knowing that these are your final indie shows coming up?
It's a little bittersweet. The reception's been really great, but I'm very fortunate in that everything is sort of lined up to the point where I'm doing these final dates for a lot of these companies that helped me out when I was kind of an unknown. Chaotic, Lucky Pro Wrestling, Northeast Wrestling, Beyond Wrestling. So it's great that that I get these farewells. Limitless Wrestling. So it's a really wonderful opportunity for both me and the companies, and I'm very much looking forward to all of them.
And as far as confirmation go, I don't know how much you can say, but is there any sort of time frame as to when we can find out for definite what your future has in store?
I honestly, I wish I knew a time frame, because I'd like to know as much as anybody else when things are set in stone. But unfortunately, I don't have the luxury of that. The most I can say is that hopefully it's soon. It feels like it probably will be, but hopefully sooner rather than later. But yeah, unfortunately, as of right now, this very moment, I don't have anything set in stone.
And just a fan question related to that. This is very jumping the gun, but who's the first guy in NXT that you would like to start a program with if you had the choice?
If I were to end up in NXT and I had a choice for a first program, that's hard to say. The first name that comes to mind is Oni Lorcan, the former Biff Busick, because he and I had so many great matches in Beyond Wrestling and Chaotic Wrestling, a few places. But there's so many guys. I mean, Tommaso Ciampa, Drew Galloway's a guy. Drew McIntyre's a guy I always wanted to wrestle. Bobby Roode has been on my list ever since he was on the Indies, and then unfortunately I had to take him off when he got signed to NXT. So there's so many guys. Aleister Black is another guy I had great chemistry with when I was able to wrestle him at Beyond Wrestling. Killian Dane, another guy who's a good friend of mine. The list goes on and on and on. If I think I had to choose one, man, it's hard to say, but probably Oni Lorcan, since I just think he and I would be able to elevate each other to a really sort of astronomical level.
And you say you watch a lot of wrestling live. How up to date are you on sort of WWE, NXT, New Japan, or what is your sort of preferred wrestling to watch in your free time if you ever get any?
I don't have much, but I do try my best to watch as much WWE as possible. I watch pretty much all of the NXTs because those are easy. It's just 1 hour a week.
Yeah.
And I can watch it on my laptop at any time. I watch all the pay-per-views, all the WWE pay-per-views, and then if I'm home and free, I try to watch Raw and SmackDown, or I at least DVR them, so that's easy because I can watch them at any other point. Yeah. Other than that, I just kind of pick and choose select matches from different stuff. I'll watch a New Japan match here and there. I'll watch an ROH match here or there. Usually, if it's something that has a lot of buzz, like I watched me and Cody are friends, so I watched his championship match from Lowell. I watch anytime one of Kenny Omega's matches blow up, I watch that. But I also watch every match on every show that I'm on for the most part, unless I'm busy doing something else. I always make time to go out and watch all those matches. So I do watch a lot of wrestling. It's just usually in person as opposed to on my TV or computer.
And how up to date are you with today's storylines in wrestling?
For that one, more. But I think anybody who enjoyed those two matches and watches this AEW match that we had, it's available on their on demand service as well as the High Spots network. So it is fairly accessible, and I just watched it for the first time the other day, and it really blew me away. You know how much there was in that match and how it all flowed together, and how much emotion there was involved in that match. It really was a special match for both he and I. So I very much enjoy that one, and I strongly encourage anybody who enjoys me or him or those first two matches or pro wrestling in general to go seek out that match, because I can't imagine anybody not really having a great time watching that match.
And this is sort of the deep question, the final question. So say tomorrow the internet, professional wrestling, all of it shut down forever. How would you, Donovan Dijak, like to be remembered?
Everything shut down tomorrow.
Everything.
I'd be remembered as a guy who put everything in to everything I've ever done, not just in professional wrestling, but in life. I really try to dedicate myself to any sort of cause or job or anything that I do, and I really try to put 100%. That doesn't mean that I always effectively do that, but I damn sure try my hardest. So I hope that people remember me as someone who was constantly trying to do his best, no matter what the platform was.